The air went cold before anyone even noticed, and I froze where I stood, my daughter's birthday cake burning my eyes with its flickering candles. Parasites. She said it again, this time slower, like she wanted every syllable to land and stick. Laughter trickled around the room, nervous, awkward, but I could feel my chest tightening as betrayal coated every word she spoke. I clenched my fists under the table, a storm brewing inside me that no one could see. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. It had started years earlier, though it felt like the world collapsed in that single word. My husband had deployed overseas, leaving me alone to manage a 3-year-old daughter and a life that suddenly felt heavier than I could carry. The pandemic had turned our small, predictable existence into a series of crises that came faster than I could react. Daycare work I depended on vanished overnight, leaving rent and groceries looming like thunderclouds. I sold what I could, took babysitting jobs, and worked silent hours at home to keep our household afloat. My mother-in-law, ever near, always ready to assert control, mocked every effort I made. She lived 7 minutes away, but proximity gave her a sense of ownership over our lives. With an emergency key she never asked permission to use, she entered our house freely, interrupting work calls, examining the smallest corners of our home with an air of judgment, and leaving behind words sharper than knives. She never saw my late-night struggles, the invisible hours I spent balancing childcare and remote work, the countless times I stifled tears to present calm and competence. To her, my work was never enough, never legitimate, never worthy. When the pandemic first hit, I remember staring at the empty streets from our kitchen window while my daughter napped, holding her tiny hand in mine and feeling the weight of the world descend on my shoulders. Every day was survival, every decision a compromise between immediate necessity and long-term hope. I sold jewelry, then furniture, then every small comfort I had hoarded over the years. I learned to stretch meals, juggle bills, and maintain a facade of stability on video calls while my husband, miles away, only glimpsed fragments of our struggle. It was a test I did not ask for, but one I met with quiet determination. I picked up a remote customer service job, carving hours out of nap schedules and sleepless nights. I learned to mute calls when my daughter cried, to smile through complaints, to maintain patience under impossible conditions. I did not tell anyone about the hours spent improving my skills, about the applications I submitted for higher-paying roles that no one knew I could manage. This invisibility became my armor, my secret pathway to eventual freedom. My mother-in-law did not acknowledge effort, she amplified failure. During her uninvited visits, she would question every move I made, often loudly enough for my daughter and the neighbors to hear. She labeled me lazy, dependent, undeserving, and incapable, turning whispered criticisms into family gossip. I tried to reason with my husband, who minimized her behavior, dismissing it as old-fashioned concern and asking me to keep the peace. Every time I swallowed my frustration, a small piece of myself hardened into resolve. By the time my daughter's birthday party arrived, the tension had been building for months. I kept the guest list small, decorated the house with care, baked the cake myself, and tried to imagine one day without judgment. But she arrived early, her eyes scanning the room as though she were inspecting territory, her words sharp before she even smiled. Comments on decorations, the table, even my choice of outfit, each one a deliberate cut. I held my tongue, counting breaths, waiting for my daughter to shine in the center of the room. And then she said it. Parasite. The room froze. My daughter stopped mid-laugh, the knife hovering over the frosting. Heads turned, murmurs spread, and I realized just how alone I was in that moment. The sting of public humiliation burned hotter than any previous struggle, and I felt a long-suppressed truth snap to the surface. I could no longer survive quietly. That night, after the guests left, I sat on the floor of my empty living room, staring at the untouched decorations, and felt the weight of everything: the isolation, the relentless criticism, the countless invisible battles. I realized survival would demand more than endurance. It would demand strategy, courage, and the willingness to reclaim the life that had been stolen, piece by piece. The following weeks became a careful dance. I locked my bedroom door during work calls. I ignored unannounced visits. I applied for new positions without telling anyone. My mother-in-law, of course, noticed and escalated. She questioned, accused, and intruded, assuming that her control could never be challenged. But with every intrusion, my determination solidified. Each time she mocked my work, I added another layer of preparation, another secret victory tucked into late-night hours and hidden successes. I discovered my own strength in silence. I began documenting every instance of overreach, every violation of boundaries, every attempt to manipulate my husband into taking her side. I started small, noting dates, times, words spoken, the context, building a record that would protect my daughter and myself when confrontation became unavoidable. And then opportunity arrived quietly in the form of a promotion from my remote employer, higher pay, growth potential, and relocation. I stared at the offer for hours, weighing fear against freedom. Moving meant shaking the very foundations of control my mother-in-law had built around us. It meant challenging my husband's complicity. It meant leaving everything familiar. But it also meant survival, a chance of autonomy I had been denied for too long. I accepted the offer without announcement, keeping the news to myself. My house, legally mine, became the next step. I listed it quietly, signing paperwork in secret, moving toward a future she could not predict. When she discovered the sale, she erupted. Accusations of betrayal, control, and selfishness poured out. She stormed, shouted, and then left, promising retaliation that I silently welcomed as the final confirmation that I was moving the right direction. By the time I changed the locks, a quiet power had settled into my chest. She could no longer enter at will, could no longer disrupt calls, could no longer claim ownership over our lives. But she did not relent. She harassed, called, and manipulated while my husband repeatedly failed to protect us. Then came the tipping point, my daughter being taken from school without permission, an incident that involved police intervention, empty insurances, and the shattering of the last fragile trust. Sitting in the empty house that night, watching the city lights flicker outside the window, I understood that everything had changed. The small, invisible victories, the secret promotions, the late-night skill building, the painstaking management of our household were not enough to protect us from someone who had always viewed control as entitlement. Something larger needed to happen, and for the first time, I felt ready to enact it. Because this time, I would not wait for validation. I would not compromise. I would not be invisible. And deep inside, I knew the confrontation that would define our lives, mine, my daughter's, and my mother-in-law's, was only just beginning. The move was supposed to feel like liberation, but the first few weeks were a blur of boxes, schedules, and whispered fear. Every morning, my daughter clung to me a little tighter, as if she could sense the storm that still lurked behind our walls. I tried to keep the atmosphere light, teaching her songs, drawing with her, making pancakes like it was just another weekend. But the shadow of what my mother-in-law could do loomed larger than any game or story. The new city felt strange. Streets that promised safety felt unfamiliar. Schools that promised stability felt foreign. I enrolled my daughter quickly, filling out forms, meeting staff, and insisting on clear boundaries for contact. The principal and teachers were kind, but I felt the weight of responsibility pressing harder than ever. Every smile from my daughter was precious, every hug a victory. It was a fragile peace, like holding water in my hands. beautiful but terrifyingly easy to lose. Meanwhile, the legal wheels began turning. The lawyer I consulted listened to my story, reviewed the documentation I had kept meticulously for months, and explained my options. Custody, protection orders, divorce, each term felt heavy, like a tool to rebuild our life brick by brick. I realized I had underestimated how complicated separating from family could be when they had a sense of entitlement, but also how necessary it was. Waiting had allowed her to escalate. Acting decisively now might protect my daughter for life. And then she came. My mother-in-law found me, tracked me to the school, and showed up unannounced in the parking lot, her eyes flaring like wildfire. She demanded to see my daughter. When I told her no, she argued, threatened, and invoked family loyalty like a weapon. I stayed calm. She tried subtle manipulations next. Calls, texts, emails to the school, to my husband, to neighbors, each message dripping with faux concern, each word aimed at sowing guilt, confusion, or fear. My husband, caught between his mother and me, faltered. He still tried to mediate, still tried to justify her behavior. I realized he could not be relied upon completely, no matter how much I wished otherwise. The realization stung, but it steeled me. I could not wait for someone else to protect us. We had to be our own shield. At night, I pored over legal documents, learning the intricacies of family law, custody arrangements, and protective measures. I learned how to write statements, how to document each interaction, and how to anticipate manipulative strategies. It was exhausting, overwhelming, but also empowering. Each fact noted, each piece of evidence secured became a step toward reclaiming control over our lives. I was no longer the helpless, silent woman who endured criticism and intrusion. I was becoming someone prepared to fight for every inch of peace. During the process, the emotional battles were just as intense. My daughter asked questions I could barely answer. "Why can't Grandma come over?" she asked one afternoon, eyes wide. I held her close and said, "Because sometimes adults forget how to be kind, but we are safe here and we are together." She nodded slowly, trusting me without fully understanding the danger. Protecting her innocence while navigating real-world conflict became a delicate dance, and every day felt like walking a tightrope over fire. The confrontation escalated further when she attempted to remove my daughter from an extracurricular class. She called, claimed an emergency, and demanded immediate access. I refused. The staff called me. I arrived within minutes to find her waiting, her expression a mixture of outrage and calculated charm. She tried to sway the onlookers, to justify her actions as family responsibility, but I stood firm. The school had documentation, I had legal counsel, and most importantly, I had clarity. I would not bend. After she left, I realized I could not rely on chance or goodwill anymore. Every move had to be deliberate, every interaction recorded. I began altering our schedules, securing passwords, and teaching my daughter to speak up politely but firmly. I implemented systems to ensure she was never alone with someone who would manipulate her. Every precaution, every boundary reinforced was a small victory in a war I never wanted but could no longer avoid. It was during these weeks of vigilance and preparation that I received recognition at work. My new role flourished. Projects I led remotely gained attention from senior management. Colleagues praised my efficiency and strategic insight. The work I had done quietly, often unseen and unacknowledged, had become undeniable. My mother-in-law had dismissed my efforts as irrelevant, but now I had tangible proof of competence, resilience, and independence. It was validation I did not need to broadcast, but it bolstered my confidence for the battle ahead. One evening, exhausted from meetings and school pickups, I sat at the kitchen table reviewing court documents. My daughter played nearby, giggling at a toy, oblivious to the storm we had weathered. I realized then how far we had come. From a powerless, mocked woman trying to survive day by day, I had become a strategist, a protector, a silent but formidable force. The game had shifted. But even as I breathed that small sigh of triumph, I knew this was only the beginning. My mother-in-law's persistence had not diminished. It had evolved. Her eyes, her words, her manipulations all hinted at a final escalation that would test every boundary I had set, every precaution I had implemented, every ounce of courage I had cultivated. Because controlling me, controlling my daughter, was all she had ever truly understood, and she would not give up without a fight. The first time I saw her on my doorstep after the school incident, I realized she had crossed a line that could never be ignored. Her eyes, wild with entitlement and fury, scanned the house as if she owned it. "I am just trying to help," she said, voice dripping with faux sweetness, but the tension in her posture betrayed her. I stood in the hallway, my daughter clutching my hand, feeling every pulse of anger, fear, and protective instinct converge in one steady, controlled calm. I did not respond immediately. Instead, I let her speak, each word a test of patience I had been building for months. She tried guilt, manipulation, and intimidation in one breath. She implied that I was unfit, that my daughter needed her guidance, that my husband was being led astray by my stubbornness. I listened, measuring, calculating, knowing that my next words would either end the escalation or ignite it fully. Finally, I spoke, firm, calm, and deliberate. "You will not enter this house uninvited. You will not take my daughter from school. You will not manipulate her or anyone else to get what you want. If you continue, there will be legal consequences." The words landed like steel, and for the first time I saw hesitation flicker in her eyes. She had expected me to bend, to falter, to plead. She had misjudged me completely. The next few days were a tense dance of legal warnings, carefully documented interactions, and reinforced boundaries. I filed for a protective custody order, detailing each violation, every intrusion, every insult. The paperwork was meticulous, the evidence undeniable. The lawyer advised me on every step, preparing me for the confrontations I knew were coming. For the first time in years, I felt the scales tipping in my favor, not through anger, not through revenge, but through preparation, clarity, and unwavering focus. Meanwhile, my work flourished. The remote position that once had been a lifeline became a platform for achievement. I led projects that required strategy, communication, and leadership, all skills honed in the crucible of my personal battles. Colleagues praised my decisiveness, my innovative thinking, my ability to remain calm under pressure. The invisible hours of struggle, of sleepless nights and silent determination finally bore tangible fruit. Every paycheck, every recognition, every small promotion was a quiet victory, proof of my resilience and intelligence. My daughter noticed the change too. She saw a mother who did not apologize for protecting her, who did not shrink from challenges, who approached conflict with courage and clarity. Her confidence grew as mine did. She learned that standing up for oneself, even against family, was not only acceptable, but necessary. She laughed more freely, slept more soundly, and started to thrive in ways she had never before. Each milestone was a silent testament to the strategy, patience, and determination that had brought us here. Then came the ultimate confrontation. My mother-in-law attempted to remove my daughter from an extracurricular activity, claiming a family emergency she had manufactured. I arrived within minutes with documentation, legal counsel on standby, and the calm certainty that I would not back down. Witnesses watched as she tried her manipulations, but they could see through it. I stood firm, my daughter safe by my side, and the confrontation ended not with tears or yelling, but with undeniable authority. Afterwards, the relief was profound. The pattern of intrusion, harassment, and manipulation was finally interrupted. My mother-in-law could no longer act with impunity. I continued the divorce proceedings, ensuring that custody, visitation, and legal protections were clearly established. Every court date, every signed order, every piece of evidence collected reinforced the security of our new life. I often thought back to the nights I had spent alone, the long hours balancing work and childcare, the silent suffering and constant judgment. Each moment of struggle had prepared me for this outcome. Every insult, every intrusion, every accusation had become fuel for a strategy that protected not only my daughter, but my own sense of self-worth and autonomy. The culmination of our journey was quiet but profound. In a courtroom, I sat calmly while the judge read the custody and protection orders aloud. My daughter held my hand, her small fingers wrapped tightly around mine, and I realized that we had achieved more than safety. We had achieved empowerment. The people who tried to define us, to control us, to humiliate us, had ultimately strengthened us instead. Returning home, I locked the doors not in fear, but in affirmation. This house, this life, these walls, all of it belonged to us, built on years of quiet resilience, strategic patience, and relentless determination. I could finally breathe without the weight of someone else's entitlement pressing down on me. My daughter played in the sunlit living room, laughter spilling into corners that once knew only tension and fear. The final satisfaction was not in punishment or revenge. It was in the calm certainty that I had done everything necessary to protect the people I loved, to reclaim the life that was ours, and to ensure that no one could ever label me ever again as anything less than capable, strong, and independent. I had been underestimated, mocked, and humiliated, but the narrative had shifted. Autonomy, legal protection, and emotional peace were no